welcome to Freedom Harvest Farms, but also welcome back to Aislynn in the Garden on Sunday mornings. Thank you all so much for joining me. If you're here live, please shout out your name, say hi, ask questions throughout this entire time. If you're catching this up on YouTube, I would love it if you would subscribe, like, and comment on any of the videos that I've done over the past year. So thank you guys all so much for coming out here and joining me today. I'm super excited to show you guys around. As most of you already know, I am moving to the farm and the date is getting closer and closer and closer. Last week's episode we talked about the sleeping garden, and I showed you how I'm really putting my backyard garden to bed as I leave that property for somewhere else. As that's the case, what's happening out here in my market gardens out at the farm is that I am doing a whole lot of summer harvesting. And I wanted to show you guys around at some of the things that are being harvested currently. And I also want to talk to you a little bit about how I harvest and why I harvest things the way that I do. So of course, if you have questions, please be sure to ask them, and I will do my best to comment and respond. Joe's going to help me out over there. Let's go look around and see what we've got going on. So as some of you already know, this is actually just one of two large market gardens that I have out. This one is got an irrigation system that my dad helped me put on it. This time of the year, well, I would say this actually probably went in about November, the irrigation system, but the garden itself began getting built about this time of the year last year, maybe August last year. And we brought in sand and compost manure from New Earth in San Antonio and built this bed up with a lot of cover cropping. I did some cover cropping this summer and let it really get some growth on it, and then went back in starting in September and building it row by row by row. So this garden actually was fully planted during the freeze in February. And it's got seeds that are starting to come back up again, different things, and then it's on to its summer garden. Now, one of the things also to note is this is my trellising garden. So this is where you see most of my cucumbers being grown, although I have quite a few in the other gardens this season too. But this is definitely where you see my tomatoes being grown. And I had an issue with my tomatoes. I lost a lot of my tomatoes in the freeze, and then got a little bit of a head start with Leo at Get Growing, where he was able to get me some good quality tomato plants right at the end of February that I was able to get in the ground. Those are the ones that did do some production for me this year before we started getting into the really hot temperatures during the daytime hours. But in the meantime, I filled in these rows over here with lots of young tomato plants that I started by seed. Yes?
Crystal asks, what's a marquee garden?
A market garden. Sorry about that.
What is a when you say market garden, you mean?
It's a larger scale garden. It's not my backyard garden is what would be considered more of a kitchen garden or a potager garden. A lot of market gardens are very specifically sized, very much about efficiency. There is, I forget, John, he lives in Canada, and his name is, I can't think of his name, but the name of his book is called The Market Gardener. And so he has very specific definition for what a market garden is. But generally speaking, it's your gardens that you're using for some sort of higher level production. Maybe you are selling to market, or maybe it's just your grocery store, which is, we're kind of in the middle of, it's our grocery store, but it's also our farm to market as well gardens. Perfect. So yes, and around the house, even out here, we will create those kitchen garden styles again. And the kitchen garden concept, we actually talked about this very recently, is if I've got my big market gardens, but up close to my house, even on a farm, I want to be able to run outside the door really quick and grab some herbs, or grab one more cucumber, or grab one more tomato. I've got some plants up by my house that are arranged in a very pleasing and aesthetically pleasing way, whereas my gardens out further out in the farm can be a little bit more about production efficiency. That's probably the best way to say it. So, okay, we're going to get started on some of the harvest things that I'm harvesting. So here's some of the long beans you've seen me harvest over the recent past. I've been harvesting them. Actually, when they get about this big, I snap and shell them, and then these I just snap into and use this in a lot of stir fries, fried rice, things like that. These have been really, really good production plants and are good trellising plants. So really, really good bean to grow with your kids if you're interested in growing beans with your kids. Of course, along here I also have some other tomatoes and squash and things like that. Lots of little golden cherry tomatoes are still coming on. All the zinnias that came up after the freeze. I've also got some different varieties of some of those long beans, yard long beans. So you can see this is one that I would probably shell and let just eat the bean part of it rather than the outside part of the bean. This is my little rattlesnake bean. This is my rattlesnake bean, and it actually did pretty good. It's my best pulling bean that I had this year aside from the yard longs. This is more of a traditional green bean. It just has some pretty like stripies on it. It's not producing as much as it was before, and now we're getting to like the drying phase beans, so letting the beans dry out. This is actually fat because of so much rain that we've gotten out there this year. So down here you can see that a lot of my little patty pans are still doing really well. That's a Starburst patty pan. And I do like to harvest them pretty small. So even though, I mean, I kind of would keep an eye on it. If I wasn't going to come back out here tomorrow, then I would go ahead and harvest those little babies right there. But since I'm going to be here tomorrow, I'm just going to let them get one day bigger.
Will you see a lot of growth in 24 hours?
With squash and cucumbers, absolutely, yeah. So another thing that we're seeing too with all that rain is that a lot of our little tomatoes and even some of our melons are starting to split. As you saw, the swelling of the beans, that happens a lot too when you have that much water.
There's so much water from the inside out.
Yes, yes, just too much water all at once, basically. So as I'm working through this garden, this direction, this season, and all the rain that we've had, I've been doing a lot of weeding. But right now, the other main thing that I do is harvest. So I've got serranos here that I'm harvesting pretty quickly every day. And the thing about any plant that has a fruit or a flower on it, the more you harvest it, the quicker you harvest it, the more it'll produce more. So don't just keep leaving them there. I mean, yes, you can leave them there to get a little bit bigger, like you'll see in my poblanos and Anaheims. I do a little bit of that, but I also want it to be productive too. So here's another tromboncino setting. If you haven't grown tromboncino yet, it is an absolute winner in every way. It grows really, really well. It's a beautiful plant. It grows a huge, massive fruit that tastes like some of the best squash you've ever eaten. Better than any of the yellow squash, and definitely better than the big zucchinis that we end up with. So you can see here, go ahead, Joe.
I was just going to say, we had some of your tromboncino squash professionally prepared this week.
Yes. So this is what happens to a cucumber, and I'll talk about that in just a second some more. But this is what happens to a cucumber.
I can't argue with 2 cucumbers in your hand.
I know, that's hard, right? So for one thing, when you see a cucumber get fat on one end and it's kind of skinny on the other end, it has to do with the fact that a cucumber needs to be pollinated. A squash needs to be pollinated like 7 times. It needs to be hit 7 times. So it might not have gotten fully pollinated. That's the reason why they kind of get like weird shapes sometimes. The other thing is that this is what happens when you don't pick every day. They turn into this. And with this size of cucumbers over here, or this style of cucumber, this is actually a pickling cucumber. The variety, I believe most of the variety that I have planted out here is actually called a homemade pickling cucumbers. And you want them to stay small. So you pick them small as often as you can. I've also been able to harvest a lot of Swiss chard. I'm not going to harvest that right now, but I've been harvesting a lot of that this year as well, even at this point in the summer. I don't see anything there, but I'm keeping an eye on all those little squash. And I have to check all of my little yellow squash babies. And I take them small because this is where they're most delicious. The bigger you let them get, they're just not as good. They're not as tasty, and then you might even have to peel them. And I've got plenty of winter squash and different kinds of squash for that kind of hardening off squash, and I don't want to leave my little young summer squash for hardening off. So that's one thing about the tromboncino too, is that you can take it as a young green squash, or you can let it harden off for a storage squash like a winter squash. So it'll just get a hard rind on the outside of it. So it's kind of up to you on how you want to deal with that. Okay, I'm taking a peek through here. I think we're good. I'm going to take a big step over this. I've got lots and lots and lots of zinnias this year. So we even will take them, like I'm not going to do this today because we're not going to get anything pickled today, but I like to take them even as small as that for pickling, because that's where they're
those little baby gherkins.
Oh my goodness, they're so delicious. They're so good. Like this size right here, by tomorrow it'll already be bigger than this probably.
Just 24 hours.
Yep, they grow really fast, especially with as much rain as we've been having. So here's I'm really happy with these little cucumbers. They're little like a cube of butter or something like that, and it looks like a little lemon. I just think they're so cute. And it's just another little yellow squash, exactly the same. If you like yellow squash, you would like this variety. I also have one that comes out with a green tipped end. It's in the yellow squash family as well. Sometimes when we're getting a lot of moisture, go ahead and pick them small, even if they're really small. And you're afraid, baby,
sorry.
it's okay. So this is a more mature one. And I mean, I was out here a day ago picking, so that's how fast just missing one can grow overnight looking like that. So that one's got a bit of a harder rind than some of these other ones do. So you can see all of these are just the basic homemade pickling cucumbers, and you just keep picking those really small.
Sorry, it's time for a turkey intermission.
Oh, okay, yes.
Oh, every time. Never gets old.
So you can actually look at some of this stuff and tell the different shaped leaves. And so it's funny because I was talking to somebody online the other day about the shapes of the leaves so that you can tell when you're squash, which kind of squash you have, or cucumber or whatever. So do you see how the shape of this cucumber leaf is more pointed, jagged? And here's another, this is cucumber right here. So more pointed and jagged like that. Well, this particular cucumber is the Armenian cucumber. And I will find one in just a second to show you guys what they look like. But it has a more rounded leaf. Can you see the difference between that more rounded leaf here, and then this more pointed leaf? That's because this is a muskmelon or a cantaloupe. So even though it's an Armenian cucumber, has a cucumber flavor, it actually will last better through the heat of the summer because it is actually in the muskmelon family. And you can tell that by looking at the shape of the leaves, that the way it grows its leaves are a little bit different. So here is my poblano. I haven't noticed them to get too big, although they're nice and dark. But here's one right here. They're not getting much bigger than this size right here. I'm gonna go ahead and take this one off. And then I just have a few flowers already setting at the top again, and I'm gonna let this one kind of keep doing its thing. So it'll grow maybe a little bit bigger than that. This is a Suyo Long. It's gotta be taken a little bit young. It's more of an Asian cucumber. Hold on, I actually don't like to do that because I like a clean cut. And this down here is, I've shown these off a little bit, but this is a salt and pepper cucumber. I also have another one that's a yellow cucumber like this, that's the Punakira, and I've been really, really happy with these. And I've been tasting all of them. Of course, we harvest them small, like I've said before, but tasting them before we put them in anything to make sure that they're not bitter, because that's the last thing you want is bitter cucumbers in the summertime.
Especially, yeah, if you taste it and then it's too bitter to use, that's a much better situation than making your dish and then discovering it's too bitter after you've already prepared it.
Yeah, but sometimes getting the not bitter it has something to do with not just the variety. Yes, the variety is important, but also the timing of when you actually harvest it, not leaving it on the vine to get so hot so long. So, okay, we're continuing this way. Here's some more serrano peppers. I'm always checking these every day to see. In the beginning, I was actually knocking flowers off, but now I'm pretty much leaving the flowers on. See how big these cucumbers get in just one day of not picking them? Actually, this may have been 2 days because I don't think I picked out here the other day. I don't know. I don't remember. Anyways, come on. Let's go. How about basil? Is everybody growing basil like crazy? Check this out. I have this really pretty basil this year. It's the Tulsi basil or the holy basil, and I like to cut between the two leaves so that I can find the most growth for the future. So see, I've got 2 leaves there, boom, it'll grow 2 more sprouts on both sides of it, like that. So I'm taking a lot of this stuff. Let's see, what are we using it for? What have we been using it for?
I made a delicious chunky vegetable puree soup.
Ooh, yes, that was really good.
I just threw a bunch of basil in there. You made that pesto sauce the other day.
Yes,
that we
very
put on
good for pesto.
For some gluten-free pizzas that we made at home, covered in your vegetables, of course. On top of that soup, I just laid a few basil leaves just to make it pretty when it hit the table. Basil, basil, basil.
Here's a fun one, a fun pepper plant that we grow pretty well down here. It's the Pekin, and these are really good if you're going to make like vinegar peppers that sit out on your countertop. Just some hot sauce, basically. This is a really good pepper for that particular variety.
I like this row with all of the flowers.
Yeah, and then usually you can see we'll have to come back in a minute and look again, but usually you can see the swallowtails. They love this part of the garden.
In front of you.
Little one. There she is. Hi there, I don't know them that well. down here you can see it gets pretty tight again with more cucumbers, but I've got, I mean, just...
These are salt and pepper right here.
Yes, here. Well, I'm going to let that one be a little bit bigger than that, but because we're not pickling right now. But and I have these up on Aislynn's Overflow of Abundance right now, so if you're looking for cucumbers, we also, with the soup we made yesterday, we made cucumber sandwiches. So that's been something good. Okay, let's keep
I even cut the crust off.
Oh, here's this Armenian cucumber. And these are really, really good for a cucumber soup. We made a cucumber soup we talk about in the podcast tomorrow. So that's a good one as well. Okay. Now, of course, it's time to start popping off the okra. It's about absolutely as big as I want it to get.
Yeah, that okra gets harder and harder the larger it is.
I'm also still popping off some of my Brussels sprouts this year.
Yeah,
so
that's fun to throw a few Brussels sprouts in.
And that's been pretty easy. Like, as it just keeps growing up and I just kind of knock the leaves off, then I can just literally pop them off like that. And then I just collect them, and I actually have a nice sized bowl of them at home that now we can cook some after having a few of them.
Garlic roasted, maybe?
Sure. Whatever. Look, I'm up for trying all kinds of things. Here's a nice little bell pepper that I grew, and I believe this one did come from Leo, originally a plant that I purchased from him. So it's a yellow bell, like it's a little yellow bell. Golden bell pepper. So we haven't let any of these go golden yet because we were needing more bell peppers, so I was harvesting them pretty quickly, but you know, you can go ahead. What I like to do is I go in and look at them, and if there's any like weak spots on them at all, then I'll just go ahead and harvest those green. And then, but if they're looking like really healthy, strong peppers, then I'm ready to let them sit for a while, then I'll let them sit and turn sweet. Because that's what happens, is the longer that they ripen, the more sweet they get. Here's another little pepper plant here too that I've been kind of watching. I think it's a lemon. And I've got quite a few. The other thing is that you'll notice in here I've got some cilantro seed, and I also have been harvesting lettuce. So as I go through these rows and clean up and do the weeding and stuff like that, I've been harvesting these heads of lettuce that have seeds in them. So that's my lettuce seeds, and then this is my cilantro seeds that I'm harvesting. Those are all equally important parts of my harvest and market garden stuff that I'm doing. This is an Anaheim pepper. I'm letting them get much bigger than this, but they get really big and nice. That's a really nice variety there.
Show me that Anaheim again.
Okay, I will. Hold on. I was trying to look at the... No, can't figure out the... Oh, look. Here's one. I'll take this one so you can see. This is what happens when they hide from you.
Oh,
there
nice.
you go. So these are the kind that you can make the chili relleno. Yum, yum, yum. Stuffed peppers. So then here's a baby little one. And when you made that chunky tomatoes, well, not tomato soup, chunky squash soup, but it was kind of a tomato soup. It had a lot of roasted peppers in it as well.
Well, you cut all your vegetables in half and roasted them for about 40 minutes in the oven.
So here is, this is actually weeds, no joke. And I knew that was going to happen. There was one big okra plant that it didn't die until the freeze in February, and it just covered this space right here, and I left it alone. And I actually planted most of my okras, the ones I purposely planted, I planted those out in the other garden by hand, and then some of them I had done my own little starts. So some of the ones that are filling in the spaces in here I did from little starts at home. But I knew that I was gonna, if I left this alone and just kind of threw the seeds down, that this would become like a little okra patch over here. And I can clean it up when I'm ready to, if I want to get it a little more manageable and tendable. But these are the types of things that would be more appropriate in more like a backyard kitchen garden, more of an edible landscape, rather than a market garden, doing these kinds of things like this. So as I get to where I need to have more efficiency in my market garden, I'll probably let less of this happen. But because these gardens are so young and new, I really just want a lot of growth happening out here. So I'm really not concerned about anything that's growing out here, even weeds that I just go through, pop off, and then throw back down. If you look at this whole row right here, you can see where I've just gone through and cleaned up. And even if I came across an onion that was no good that I was harvesting, I'm just gonna drop it down in the row down there, because all of this stuff helps to compost in place, and just gives life to this piece of land that I'm now taking from, I need to continue to keep giving back to. So keep an eye out on your okra right now. It's really time. I don't even mind taking them as small as that because I think they're delicious pickled like that.
Show me again.
You can eat them raw like that. I just dropped that as I picked it. You can eat them raw. I don't know if anybody knows that, but okra is actually my favorite way to eat okra is raw. And okra has a lot of benefits for your body. I mean, all the vegetables have different things, but okra is a very known health medicinal thing that we almost hate. A lot of us almost hate it. So if we can figure out ways that we like to eat it, that we can, I think, and I did say this on the podcast last year, I think that we cook it too much. Like we should, I mean, unless we're making like a stew and we want it to get, because that's the reason why it got put into like the stews and the okras and stuff like that, is because it was a good agent of, what do you call it? Thickening agent. And so that's why it goes into a lot of that stuff. But otherwise, I think we should be harvesting the okra really, really young and either pickling it or eating it raw. Even maybe just my parents have always done a little pop in the microwave. I think my mom probably does a little pop on the air fryer now too, which would be the answer for that as well at this point. So, okay. All of that being said, I haven't even told you yet what I'm actually harvesting. The big stuff. Let's go check out the fig tree.
Can you close that behind me?
Yep. So this would be more of a edible landscape, production landscape type of situation. And what they're trying to do over here with the types of things she's trying to grow in here. And as she gets more plants planted, of course we manage the freeze out here as well in this section right here. So things that almost died back to the ground, Turk's cap, now back up and happy, all the flowers back on it, and it's beginning to fill in its space here with all the different types of plants that she's planted, beautyberry, and she'd be able to tell you everything. But we have this massive fig tree over here. Come in here. Look at the trunk and the bottom of that thing. This thing has lived through the hurricane, the freeze. It actually is healthier this season than it has been in several seasons. And I've been going around just the bottom row. If you look up, you can see how many, of course, the birds and the other creatures are getting the ones up at the top. But my goodness, it's like covered, and I've not even gone up yet. Can you see how many figs are on this tree?
Mm-hmm.
It's amazing. So I go around, I spend about 30 minutes to an hour almost every day harvesting figs and then getting them out to everyone. You know, in the Aislyn's Everfull Abundance, I actually put a marketplace sales up too. So if you're looking for figs, just let me know. I'm doing them either $6 a pound or 5 pounds for $25. So let me know if you're interested in that. But you can see that I'm picking them pretty much like this. I don't do a whole lot of, honestly, I don't do a whole lot of picking without my gloves on, because there's so much, some yellow gloves tightened up in here, because there's so much, what do you call it, latex. It actually burns my skin. And then also I want to not accidentally run into yellow jackets again without having some kind of level of protection between.
So are you looking for a color? Are you looking for a size?
I'm looking for ones that I can just tell. I mean, yes, color is certainly a part of it, right? But also, how colorful wise? Can I pretty easily pop it off the stem?
Crystal says, "I want figs."
Is that Crystal Parker?
Crystal Mead.
Crystal Mead. Oh, we'll tell Crystal. Okay, I'll get with her on Monday about that. So okay, cool. Well, that's what I have to say today.
So how many pounds of figs did you pick in that hour that you picked them yesterday or the day before?
I can pick in an hour. I can pick about 20 pounds of figs pretty easily. Mm-hmm. On this tree, there's another tree, and then a bunch more trees that are out, like in the orchard area of the farm, that are about to really take off. This will be maybe their first season of having really good fruit. I think it's an important conversation. A lot of people are talking. Fig is absolutely one of the best trees we can grow in our area. I hear people complaining about the animals eating their figs, but if a tree's producing this much figs, then you have plenty to share with the animals, and you have plenty to have of your own as well. So that plant isn't exactly harvesting at its highest potential, basically. Like, this plant is harvesting at its highest potential. So I'm not concerned about the bugs and things that are eating the stuff on it. So those are some things to consider. If the pests and the squirrels and other things are eating your fig tree, or your figs are dry and they're not getting really nice and firm and juicy, then it's likely you're having issues. The health of the plant is not as healthy as you think it is. And it may be healthier next season after it's gone through a nice freeze if it didn't die during the freeze. And if it died during the freeze, it was either in a really, really cold microclimate space, or it was not healthy to begin with, because basically they just died. They just froze back, got cleaned up, and then came out even bigger and happier. The really healthy ones. Things that have made these two trees close to the house really, really healthy is the fact that they're in a position to get a lot of runoff from the house and from any kind of washing that goes out into the yard, like the safe sink washing that we do that goes out into the yard. And so that's why these trees are getting a massive amount of water. I know he does. My dad is the one that tends to manage the trees up to this point, and I know he's done a lot of fertilizing for some of the other trees out in the orchard. I would guess he probably has done some fertilizing for these trees as well. I know for a fact that azomite was put on all of the trees at least once, maybe twice over the years, because we were there was a lot of azomite donated to the region after the flood, and we got some of that for our trees as well. So those are just some things to keep in mind. Like, if your fig tree is not producing you a harvest, then it needs something from you, even if it's because the critters are eating a lot of it. Those are just some things to keep in mind. Great fig season. This is the Celeste fig. It's one that does really well. And I'll be letting you guys know what I'm seeing more of with the other different types of figs that we have as they start to really get more in production over the next few years.
We talk about figs on the podcast tomorrow.
We talk about figs on the podcast tomorrow. And I also didn't say from the very beginning of this, Happy Independence Day, my friends. I can't tell you of a celebration that means more to me in all God's honest truth than celebrating our independence. I love you all. I hope that you have the best day ever. Enjoy all the beautiful fireworks that are going off in whatever spaces you're in. Good, whether you're in the part of the country that is shooting fireworks off every other house or not, as we kind of are down here. But enjoy that show. Enjoy your life. Have a fantastic week. If you're checking this out on YouTube, please subscribe, like, comment. If you've got a question, ask them. I'll jump on there and do my best to answer them as quickly as I can. Have a beautiful day. Bye. Love you.